Thank you, NASSCOM, for the opportunity to be a part of the NASSCOM Product Conclave 2021. My name is Gary Oliver, and I'm delighted to share.
Thank you, NASSCOM, the opportunity to be a part of the NASSCOM.
I'm even more excited to have a conversation with two friends and colleagues who will bring such great perspective to this topic. Very quick background on me. I spent the first half of my career in leadership roles in large companies like IBM, Visa, and Remedy. At Visa, part of my role was to find innovative technologies that could help make employees more productive or to give the business a competitive advantage. So I spent a lot of time with startups looking at technology and figuring out how that would work into a big organization like Visa. The second half of my career, I've been CEO or chairman of some very exciting startups. So I have the perspective both from an early stage company looking to scale and from a large company looking for solutions. Currently, I'm the CEO of Excelerate, which is a wonderful community of leaders helping startups from around the world succeed. So let's jump directly in here. This is usually over an hour conversation, so we'll try to summarize it quickly, and then we'll jump into the conversation with my two esteemed colleagues. Okay, insights for selling to large corporations in global markets. What I'm going to talk about is some tips and things that I've learned over the years. And again, usually this is followed by a lot of Q&A. So I invite anyone who's on the line today to reach out. I'm happy to do one-on-one discussion or sessions with you. And thank you very much for attending. The first point I'd like to make is that large corporations will absolutely buy innovative solutions from early stage companies. But the thing they won't do is they won't compromise when it comes to security, to support, performance, or mission critical functions. While they may be enamored with the technology and what it can do for the company, it's got to make sure to pass these other things. Otherwise, they can't risk their brand or their business on these solutions. So keep that in mind. The technology is absolutely critical, but it really is the business impact that should be the primary focus of your sales presentation. Many early stage founders are great technicians. They've built incredible product, but sometimes the presentations come off a little too technical and not as much business focused. The technical is important when you talk about how you impact the business, but the business impact should be the primary focus of the sales presentation. And most importantly, follow it with examples and references of how you've been able to really help your clients succeed. Very important when selling to enterprise customers, especially in the US and in Europe, is determine who all the stakeholders are. Understand their roles. Who is an influencer? Who is the buyer? Who is the decision maker? Who is the end user? And you really need to build a comprehensive plan to address all these constituents, as they will likely have a say in the final decision. So even though you may get someone excited about the technology, if the folks responsible for security or infrastructure, architecture aren't convinced, you may have a tough time getting it through. Just keep that in mind. Also, fine-tune your messaging, your positioning, your value proposition, and competitive positioning in the market that you're going after. These situations may change from market to market, so really understand this, and then validate. Find prospective customers or advisors or others that can give you feedback to make sure that your messaging is on point for that specific market you're going after. Something that works in one geography may not work in another geography, and make sure you understand that. Make sure that your website and marketing materials reflect the same messaging as the presentation that you give the client, and that your references and success stories are front and center. Realize your website's the first place the enterprise is going to go in order to learn about the team, learn about your customers, your use cases, and also your investors. The quality of collateral, the sharpness of presentation, and touch points like UI and UX have a big impact on giving customers confidence in your company. Make sure that you prepare both an elevator pitch and also full presentations, and make sure you practice these over and over and over. One tip that sometimes folks don't realize is that not all terms and phrases from your home or core market may be relevant in the market you're going after. So make sure you take some folks that are representative of that new market and run by the presentations, make sure they understand exactly what you're saying. Many times, if they don't, if a customer doesn't understand the point you're trying to make, they're not necessarily going to call you out on it, and you're gonna miss the sale. Anticipate and deliver answers before they ask the questions and build credibility. I'll give you a good example of this. One of my early startups, we had a big impact on infrastructure. We had to integrate with other core systems. And so we knew that the question of security and scalability is going to come up. So before they asked it, we would actually present them with a white paper that had a Q&A of all the things they might think of. And it really lowered the blood pressure and made them realize we were ready for the enterprise, that we had anticipated the things that were important for them to deploy globally. Also understand the pricing models and the strategies that they're used to. Reduce friction in the buying process. Most large corporations don't like to bend their standard procurement processes when they're buying from a new vendor. Once you have many, many customers and many references, sometimes you can use your own contracts or paper, but realize that as much as you can fit into their pricing models without impacting your business model, the better. And again, most large enterprises want to use their contracts as a starting point for agreements. So it's very helpful to have legal resources available to do this, with an eye again to the local regulations, the local language in the new market. Get resources that can help you in those markets from a contractual perspective when you're negotiating with your large enterprise customers. Enterprise want differentiated solutions while managing perceived risks associated with smaller companies. So as a new brand in a new market, references from current customers are absolutely critical, even if they come from other markets or geographies. Maybe you don't have customers in the new geography you're going after, but you've got some great references from your core market, and don't be shy about using those. Make sure you have customers that are willing to jump on the phone and talk about the business impact, talk about what it's like working with your company from a customer support perspective and from a credibility perspective. That will go a long way in establishing a beachhead in a new marketplace. Getting pilots paid for is a good way to get some level of initial commitment. If you're a true SaaS model where all you have to do is give them a login and password, they can play with the system, that's one thing, and you probably don't need to have a paid pilot. If you have a very comprehensive enterprise solution that's going to impact their infrastructure, that's going to require integration with current existing systems, more than likely they're going to want to do an extensive pilot. And getting them to pay for that is a really good first start to get commitment. And be very clear on how success will be measured and exactly what the next steps would be towards a successful engagement. So go in with really clear measurements and what it's going to take to succeed, and really manage to those expectations. Also, having technical and support resources on the sales team gives the client comfort that you can support them through the pilot once implemented. Again, this is about trying your product out, but also if you have the capability to really support them on an ongoing basis. So they're looking to deploy you into the critical infrastructure and operations. It really gives them comfort to have technical resources as part of the sales engagement to talk about 7x24 support and other things that they might require on an ongoing basis. And probably most importantly, as an early stage startup trying to get into a new market, find a way to get warm introductions at the senior level. This can take 4 to 6 months off a sales cycle and give cover for the teams evaluating your product inside the company. Find supporters, advisors, investors, or others that can reach out and make these warm connections, and where you're going to get great feedback, and you're going to have opportunities where you don't have to fight to get up the chain to get to the decision maker. If you can start there, it really makes a tremendous difference. This is what Excelerate is all about, and happy to talk to you about that if you'd like, but really get to the point where you can have warm introductions at a senior level. And now I'm very excited to introduce two of my colleagues and close friends. First is Alastair Woolcock. Alastair has been an executive in large companies. He's been a founder in startups. He's currently also a vice president and analyst at Gartner Group. He spends his days at the confluence of early stage companies looking to access enterprises, and also working with large CEOs of global organizations on helping them understand how to buy from early stage technology companies. So great to have him on board. And also Josh Jewett. Josh was ex-CIO of the Dollar Tree. So he's run very large retail operations, has bought a lot of technology from early stage companies, also invested in early stage companies, and he's currently an operating partner at NewRoad Capital Partners. So in a moment here, I'm going to have them join me on the call. And thanks again for joining us. Hey, Josh and Alastair, it's so great to have you join today. The audience has been listening to me ramble on about tips and tricks to selling to the enterprise and things to think about. And the two of you have so much expertise and years in this area. So maybe, Josh, maybe I'll start with you. You know, as the CIO of an extremely large retailer, I'm sure you looked at a lot of early stage technologies and tried to figure out how to leverage them for competitive advantage, but also what that meant in terms of deploying them in a scalable way. If I were the founder of a early stage startup coming to you to try to sell, give me some tips or things to do or not to do, if you would.
Well, thanks, Gary. I would say first off, the most important thing probably is to lead with the business value. You touched on that in your overview. Is even though you may be speaking predominantly to an IT audience, lead with the business value. In large scale enterprises, the IT leaders are really business leaders that happen to lead the IT function. It doesn't mean they don't care about the underlying technology. They'll get to that. They do care about the security. They care about the scalability. They care about your ability to integrate into their existing infrastructure. But I think the most important thing to lead with really is what is the business value that you bring to the table. That's how you make a connection, that you understand their business and you're here to bring value. And it's not just about the latest and greatest application of technology.
And everything else is behind that, right? How you do it, how the technology works, all that. But if you don't catch them on the business value as a busy CIO, your eyes are going to glaze over pretty quick and say, okay, I'm moving on with my day.
Yeah. It's like they say about resumes, right? People make a decision within the first 30 seconds. I think it's kind of like that with elevator pitches, right? That's what we call them, the concise pitches. And I would go on an annual basis. I would spend some time with startups either in California or Texas or New York, just to kind of understand what's coming and how they might apply to my business, if not directly to me, as an underlying foundational technology of a ISV that I might use in my business, right? So sometimes the startups were for me directly, and sometimes the startups were actually for companies that service me. So understanding that was really, really important to me. So I got a lot out of those times that I spent with startup companies as well.
Yeah, you'd be a great advisor for an early stage company trying to figure out how to maneuver through the world of retail and large companies. Alastair, how about you? I know your calendar is booked every day with meetings with both early stage companies and global CIOs. What are some of your thoughts here?
Well, it's a great question, Gary. So when I think about this, one of the biggest things I see day to day, we see at Gartner worldwide and all of that. Once these early stage companies have gone past the classic Rolodex, right? Engage with who they know, the friends and family contacts they have. It's all about scaling up. And it is always the question of, how do I get in front of Josh and his company? If I could just have 30 minutes with Josh and show him all these wonderful things we do, we're confident he would buy. And yet the reality is, the data is very clear on this. The amount of time that an average company actually spends so Josh's company in this scenario, right, would actually spend with vendors to evaluate a problem they're solving and actually interacting with them. It's only about 17% of their entire buying journey. 17. So you got to ask yourself, as you're thinking about scaling up and where you want to go, are you going to put all of your eggs behind the idea that I just got to get meetings with Josh? Or are you going to accept the fact that Josh probably actually is never going to buy something simply by him meeting with somebody? He's going to have a bunch of people in his organization that drive that buying process. And the data again here is very clear. We know that on average it's anywhere between 8 and 11, sometimes I has 13 or 14 people actually involved in that process. So when you suddenly sit there and go, oh my goodness, this is really hard to scale up. It is, because you can't have a salesperson targeting 10, 11 people in an account. Your cost of sales is going to go through the roof and things are going to break, right? You just won't get the volume you need relative to the investment you're making in your tech company to scale. And so, in light of all of this, the obvious next step you hear a lot of you say is, this is all about now digital, right? We got to invest more in digital. We got to do a bunch of stuff on that front. And that's true. And we know that buyers, by the way, engage with digital-based assets and content throughout the totality of their buying experience. Even baby boomers they actually will be above 90% engagement with digital assets for early, middle stage buying steps. And even at late stage, they only drop to 68. And by the way, below baby boomers, it's still over 80 to 90% range engagement. And so you need to really think through, how do I help Josh and his team buy? Not just demonstration of problem, because if you can't demonstrate a problem, as Josh said, and how you're solving something, you're dead on arrival to begin with, right? So we have to anchor around a problem. Assuming we can do that, assuming you're clear on that, then at that point it's all about, how do I help him buy? How do I help him solve that problem? And by the way, that maybe it leads to your technology. It may be you're helping him compare things in the market and contrast and have the confidence to buy. And I often say it in this just most simplistic way. The job is not so much to sell Josh as it is to help Josh buy, because Josh doesn't buy every day. You sell every day, they don't buy every day. So most buyers lack confidence around the decision that they want to make. It's not they don't distrust tech companies and startups. Most love them. Josh said he loved meeting with them. We see that. But he needs confidence that those things can solve the problem. And so you got to really focus on these confidence elements in a big way.
Those are great points. If I could just add quickly to that, generally speaking, it didn't work well to try to hit me directly, right? You talked about it's a committee sale, and there was much less friction if it came up through my organization to me as a great idea of a problem we were trying to solve, from a collection of my direct reports or from some of my staff or a task force I created to go after the problem with one of the business leaders. And I do think that that's an important way to think about it, is in large scale enterprises. The other point I'd make to resonate on something Alastair said is, when you enter the year, the calendar year, the fiscal year, whatever it might be for your company, your dance card is already full at IT shop. Your capital budget is already allocated. You might have something a little squirreled away for a rainy day, but you're generally not scratching your head saying, gee, what am I going to buy this year? You already have a plan. So coming into that plan and trying to dislodge something that may already be planned is what you really have to do. Plus, you have to understand there's likely to be an incumbent solution in place that you're looking to augment or replace or so forth. So some of that homework prior to getting to those pivotal meetings with the decision makers, a step or two below the CIO, is helpful. Getting that information from outside observers, colleagues of the company, people that you know that work there, et cetera. Getting that insight and that intelligence prior to going in there really helps you understand the dynamics of the sales cycle, to Alastair's point, and how do you help them fit your solution into what it is that they're doing, and how can it be collaborative and not competitive with other things on their agenda.
Yeah, I to that point, Josh, I often say, as we're looking at it, when we look at growth companies versus non-growth companies, what you see is that growth companies, when we look at the delta of how they perform better in go-to-market activities, there's a few things that really jump out. Number one, they're better at targeting by persona, so by role. And everybody, again, always wants to jump to the most senior person. We're like, but hold on. The architect is important in this decision-making, as is the procurement officer, as is finance, as are all these different people, right? And those people, once we know who they are, the next step is, but what's the challenge and what's the benefit to them in their role? The benefit of a technology to an architect is very different than the benefit to a CIO, right? You may both have the same problem, but why we would engage and why we would look at is different. So you need to win the individual champion mindset of what's going in there, while still keeping in mind of the big picture of what's going on. So once we've done those two steps, role and challenge by role, then we want to talk to, okay, now what's the benefit of your technology and how is it differentiated? And the benefit isn't, oh, well, look, I have a checkmark diagram that I can show Josh and say, look, I have 6 check marks and my competitors all have 3. And nobody believes that stuff. What they want to know is, how can you help me as a buyer, how are you helping me have competitive advantage? How are you helping me do better? And there's that simple, like it's a subtle but significant step of, instead of saying this is my technology and it's better than the other thing that you've had before, it's that problem again that we spoke of. And now you got to think of it in the context of that role, to challenge by role, and then, hey, how are we helping that role drive some form of competitive advantage? And the final thing we see them do is and this is very tactical, but they then use case studies to support that, and a case study that has quantification in it. You can't just send qualitative commentary all the time, right? And even think to back what I said at the beginning. How much time do buyers spend with vendors? 17%. Well, you tell me what you're going to action more on. The idea that I just say, hey, by the way, buyers don't spend much time with vendors, or buyers only spend 17% of their time with vendors. Well, they're 17% and then back it out with the data. Suddenly, well, okay, I need to do something about that. But if you just say qualitative things, how could you expect your buyer to champion this internally? They go, well, I don't know if I really believe that is what happens.
Or to your point, Josh, to both of you, I remember back at Visa, we'd get in a room, we'd have all the business unit leaders there. And I was running the IT for the company, and we'd put up our list of projects and where we had in budget, and there'd be a line, some had to come up or below the line, some had to come out, right? Or where we'd make investment. And you're right, Alastair, it was always on a quantitative level. How am I going to get payback? What this is going to do for new revenue streams? How am I going to, increase productivity? What things can I take out of my current plan? Like you said, Joshua, can I sunset a bunch of applications because I'm using this new technology to replace some of these things? If I put my founder hat back on, or someone that might be listening to this, who's maybe established a great business, let's say in India, they've got wonderful customers, they've got good technology, and now they're looking to make inroads into the US, let's say in financial services or large retail organizations. It feels like a pretty daunting task from what you just said. Give me some examples of kind of when it's worked, Josh, like when you've seen an early stage technology company that really, what was it that made them get your attention and make them, want to consider them throughout the organization, or any tips you might have there?
We mentioned earlier some of the warm introductions, right? Nothing is frankly better than having someone recommend something to you that you ought to go take a look at this, whether it's a consultant, a business partner, a peer in a different organization. And then to have that corroborated elsewhere when you either go do independent research and you go to the website, you might read an article on it here or there. So having sort of independent corroboration that something is worth considering is comforting when you step into it the first time. But I would say nothing really replaces that first successful warm introduction by a colleague.
Yeah, and Alastair, as you said, nothing's better than use cases and examples. And we tell founders all the time, they're looking to come to the US. It's okay if you have great use cases in a financial services organization in India, for example, and the CIO or the head of digital or whoever is willing to speak about it, give you examples. That's very powerful. So don't be afraid to leverage those use cases wherever you might have them, and play up on them until you get your beachhead in the US. You can start to then leverage maybe better known brands in the US, but as you said, make it quantitative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the US market in particular, when we think of geo expansion, for the reasons everybody knows, is very attractive, right? It's a big market, right? There's a lot of spend there. It's the highest percentage tech spend in the world, relative to other areas. And yet, if I said to you, imagine we were talking about Europe as geo expansion, and I said, well, look, we're going to go target Europe. Well, would you for a second think that selling in Sweden is the same as selling in Italy, as it is selling in Croatia, as it is to the United Kingdom? Like, well, of course it's not. That's crazy. We clearly would need to regionalize and think through how we would go through that. Okay, but the United States is as diverse, both culturally, geographically, as Europe is. Granted, it may not have the language differences, but the economic variances within each area is there. So the trick to expanding in the US, get the lighthouse account, target a vertical geo area, and go narrow to go big. Too often firms want to come over and go, but I have a security product that is going to change the world, and I just need to tell as many people as possible. Well, you can be a whole lot of nothing to everyone, or you could be something significant to a few. And being significant to a few is key. So the verticalization component and contextualizing your information to specific audiences is the key to driving those, beyond the warm contact into the next few, right? And even when you, even if you get to your warm contacts, if you can't speak of their industry, and you can't speak to the benefit there, and you're just going to want to focus in on the technology of how it's better, you're not going to close the deal, as your odds decrease drastically. So that contextualization and focus is one of the biggest things. And that's why at Gartner, we see, the ability to understand the market intelligence, the ability to build, clear business cases around this stuff, the ability to understand the specific target market you're going after, and then tying in your partnerships and everything else with that, and your advisor teams to help you in those markets is key. Because, as Josh will probably attest, retail, I'm sure he'd love to, who wouldn't go talk to Jamie Dimon at a bank? Sure, sounds great. But, talking to a fellow retailer is gonna be a lot more beneficial than talking to somebody that came out of banking, right? And then
Alastair, you make a great point. And Josh, I know part of your role in your organization is you guys are looking at the future of retail, right? Every little slice of how technology can impact the future of retail. And to what you said, Alastair, if the company approaching Josh can't talk that language, they're going to have a tough time. So what you're saying is find a beachhead, land and expand, do really good at one thing, leverage the credibility, leverage the lighthouse accounts, and move on from there. Take your next market or expand.
Yeah, that's right. And centralize your resources in the go-to-market efforts as well. Don't think I'm going to put East Coast, West Coast, and I got the country covered. You wouldn't do that anywhere else in the world. You certainly wouldn't do it here where the addressable market is that big. It will lack success.
I do think if as a founder, if you are about the technology and you understand the basics of the business problem you're trying to solve, whether it be security or operational or what have you, customer engagement. If you need help with the language, if you need help with, and I mean the vernacular of the industry, if you need help with how to communicate to executives, get help. Reach out to friends and colleagues, have them participate in these sessions that you do, have them be a test audience for you to pitch to, so you can practice and hone your message and get some advice. I think perfect practice makes perfect, right? As I said, so do some dry runs, get some people that are in the industry to help you hone that pitch, so you're using the right terminology, and you're communicating effectively. Nothing will trip up a presentation more than if you don't know some of the basics of the industry and what some of the key terms.
So find some friendlies, some advisors, investors, or people that would represent a customer, and let them beat you up and give you feedback. And as you said, hone the pitch before you go live. And
they can even participate in meetings with you with prospects to help facilitate some of the dialogue and the discussion. And I think I found that useful in the past, right? Because there's another set of ears in a meeting that can after the fact play back how it was heard, how it was said, give you feedback on the pitch and the presentation. Yeah. Well, guys, we could spend hours talking about this from all the years of experience you've had, and so my experience. And for those that are watching, I offer to, if they want to reach out and have some more sessions, we're certainly willing to talk to them. Thank you so much for participating, Alastair and Josh, and thanks for all those listening. And been great to be part of this NASSCOM event. Thanks again.